Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 14 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk more about this year's rookie class, particularly some sleepers and those third and fourth round rookie picks. We covered the first half of the draft class on last week's episode, so if you missed that, go back and find it, listen to it on your platform of choice. But today we're going to be focusing more on the third and fourth round, some undrafted free agents, guys that you should be looking to target that I think are good values. And we're also going to talk about a couple guys that I think you should avoid given their current price in rookie drafts. So as always, go give us a follow on Twitter at Dynasty War Room. Go subscribe to us on YouTube at Dynasty War Room. And, leave us some comments, questions. We'll be happy to interact with you. And we appreciate you all for tuning in. And with that, we're just going to jump right into some more rookie talk. So last week, as I mentioned, we covered the top 25 in our rookie rankings. I think we actually bled over a little bit and covered up to, 28 or so, 28, 29. So I'm just going to give a highlight again of my top 24 from last week. I don't think there were any major changes between then and now. I think only one comes to mind, and it was I flipped two players at the very end of these rankings. So again, from the top, number one was Caleb Williams. And again, this is based on a 12-team Superflex format with tight end premium. So Caleb Williams, number one, Marvin Harrison at 2, Malik Neighbors 3, Jaden Daniels 4, JJ McCarthy 5, Drake May 6, Rome Odunze 7, Brock Bowers 8, Xavier Worthy 9, Brian Thomas 10, Bo Nix 11, Jonathan Brooks 12, Ladd McConkey 13, Keon Coleman 14, Ricky Pearsall at 15, Michael Penix off the board at 16 in my rankings, Trey Benson 17, Xavier Legette 18, Jalen Polk 19, Roman Wilson 20, Blake Corum 21, Adonai Mitchell at 22, Troy Franklin at 23, and Ben Sinnott at 24. So last week I had Jalen Wright in the 24 spot and Ben Sinnott at 25. I've flipped those two players, so I now have Sinnott at 24, Jalen Wright at 25, and that is my top 25. So had success with those rankings. So far, I've completed 4 different rookie drafts. I got a few more kicking off this week and then throughout the month. So we'll have more and more actual drafts to go off of to see, exactly where players are going, what kind of value you can get. But Sleeper in particular, that's the app I use for all my Dynasty leagues. They updated their ADP, pretty quickly, by Wednesday or Thursday or so of this past week. Most of that ADP data was up to date, or at least closer to it. There's still definitely some players lagging behind, which are some of the guys I'm going to highlight on this show that you can pay attention to as, solid fourth round picks or guys that are going undrafted that probably should be taken in your draft. But let's just briefly run through my third round players in this draft and how I see it right now. So with Ben Sinnott at the cutoff at the 212, he's actually somebody that I do really like. He's going at the 2-3 turn. I've seen him go at the late second, I think at least once, potentially twice, and then early third at least twice. So pretty split among just the 4 drafts that I've been in. But it seems like the consensus is right at this 2-3 turn, and I think he gives you some pretty solid value as the tight end 2 in this class. So just want to point that out. I do like where Sinnott is going. I have Jalen Wright at 25, another guy that I have a few shares of already. Both I have him here at the 301 in my rankings, and I've gotten him at the 302 and the 306. And that kind of wraps up a tier for me. So Jalen Wright in that tier was all those guys going at the end of the second. But in the third round, I have Jermaine Burton at 26, Marshawn Lloyd, Javon Baker, Jatavian Sanders, Kamani Vidal, Jalen McMillan, Devontae Walker, Malachi Corley, Ray Davis, Bucky Irving, and Will Shipley. And that's my 26 to 36 in my rankings. And starting with this group, a few things I want to point out. One, I was pronouncing Kamani Vidal wrong on previous episodes. I looked it up. It is Vidal, not Vidal. So apologies there. But he's somebody I think he's the player that I'm going to start with here because he's an extremely popular sleeper name and somebody that I think a lot of people are interested in given the good landing spot going to the Chargers. And I really like the fit. I like the player a lot. He was somebody that I definitely had my eye on as a, really strong potential sleeper in this draft. And the only downside to that is that he has now been pushed up quite a bit in rookie drafts, and it's getting close to the point where I'm not as comfortable taking him. I have him at 30 in my rankings, so that is right in line with the 306, and I think that's about the earliest that I would take him. I'm not sure that there's really a scenario where I would be trying to take him before the 306. Maybe if you had a team that was, stacked at tight end, you didn't really need to add somebody like Jatavian Sanders. I could see a 305. But when you start getting earlier than that, and I've seen him go in the early third on occasion, and I've seen, other people talk about loving Kamani Vidal, and I think the early third is too soon for him. I think mid to late third is a much better place to pick him up. I nabbed him last night in my home league draft at the 308, which was a spot that I feel much more comfortable with compared to where I've seen him go in other leagues. I've seen him, I think, most commonly go in the sort of that 304 to 308 range. So I prefer the back half of that group of picks. But again, he's in a really good spot. The Chargers have, a J.K. Dobbins coming off of a very severe injury, picked up Gus Edwards, who's shown he's an okay running back, but nothing special. And there's certainly going to be some playing time there. They didn't address the position earlier in the draft like a lot of people expected. And the door is open for plenty of carries. And we all know that Jim Harbaugh is going to want to run the ball. So this is a guy that, if you don't like some of these other players that are going in this range, particularly kind of the next grouping of running backs, which who are all drafted ahead of him in the NFL draft. And, typically, that's not the best bet to make, taking a 6th round running back over some guys that went in the 4th. But it's something that I'm willing to do given the situation, which I think is very important for day 3 running backs. It would be different if some of the other running backs that I mentioned, like Bucky Irving, Will Shipley, Braylon Allen, Isaac Guerrendo, Audric Estime, all those guys, if they had gone in the 3rd round, I think it would be a totally different scenario. But, day 3 draft capital is a big deal versus day 2. And, with only the handful of running backs that went on day 2, really Brooks and Benson standing out the top, and then Blake Corum and then Marshawn Lloyd. And, Jalen Wright, I think, is the very clear best running back of those 4th round guys. And I actually have him above Marshawn Lloyd in my rankings by a couple picks. But after Marshawn Lloyd, I think there's a huge drop. And I'm willing to take the shot on the player that, to me, has the highest ceiling and the best opportunity of those running backs. So Kamani Vidal, he's the guy here that is the first player that I think is a really good sleeper in this draft, as long as you're not reaching to take him in your drafts. Now, we mentioned Ben Sinnott. He's another guy that's in this 2-3 turn range, but a guy that I've seen go in the 3rd, I think, in every draft that I've done is Javon Baker. I picked him up at 306 in a league, and this is a guy that I think a lot of people liked pre-draft, and he goes to a situation in New England where it's weird because there is certainly going to be a lot of competition, but it's a lot of mediocre wide receivers and no, elite wide receiver 1 type of player. So Jalen Polk, I think, is the guy that you should be taking certainly ahead of Javon Baker, given the early second round draft capital. But I have, Jalen Polk up at 19 in my rankings. So he's somebody that I'd be looking at in the mid-2nd, but in the mid-3rd, I think Javon Baker is a very solid pick because, he's coming into the league at the same time as his new quarterback in Drake May. It's wide open competition at the wide receiver spot on the Patriots. There's Mario Douglas and KJ Osborne. But other than that, it's really going to be Polk and Baker that, have a huge opportunity. And I like Javon Baker as a deep threat. Drake May has a huge arm. I think that there's some opportunity for them to, grow together over time. And again, we talked, when you get into these third and fourth rounds, opportunity, I think, matters a little bit more because from a talent perspective, I think the gap is not as wide between some of these guys as it is in the first and second round of your rookie drafts, where, talent can certainly matter a lot more than opportunity. But when you get further down, I think, the gap there, talent versus opportunity is not as important of a factor to me when you're talking about mid to late third and then fourth round rookie picks. Those are the opportunities where I'm finding players that are going to get on the field or at least have the path to get on the field. See if you can hit on that type of lottery ticket. And that's how I prefer to spend my picks, is get guys that will be on the field as soon as possible and see what you can get. Because chances are you're probably just going to be cutting some of these guys that are, you're taking in the fourth round. Javon Baker is somebody you'll hold on to. Certainly he's, going to be a high enough pick where you're going to give him at least 2 years, but at least as a general note for fourth round picks. That's how I like to approach the situation. So Javon Baker, the next player on my list that I like in the third round, I think provides a pretty good value given where he's being drafted. I have him ranked at 28. And he's going in the mid third in my experience and given current sleeper ADP. So I think that's a pretty good spot for him heading to the New England Patriots. The next player that I want to talk about is another mid to late third round pick, and that's Jalen McMillan out of Washington. He went to Tampa Bay in the third round of the NFL draft. And I have him ranked at 31 in my rankings. I actually have him in a 2-man tier with Kamani Vidal. And it's interesting because, from an analytical and just numbers-based perspective, Jalen McMillan is kind of the obvious player to prefer in that situation because he's a third-round wide receiver, day 2 pick. But, he goes to a situation where he's probably going to be waiting at least a year before he sees much of a real opportunity. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are still going to dominate targets in that offense. Trey Palmer had a good rookie season last year, so he's probably going to start the season out as wide receiver 4 on the Bucs. But I think after this season, and particularly in year 3, is where he's really going to see a nice opportunity, assuming that he shows, some solid, growth in his first year and sees the field at least somewhat. And because Mike Evans is on 2-year deal, Chris Godwin might not be there after this season. Trey Palmer had a very nice rookie year, but the Bucs went out and drafted McMillan here in the third round. So, there's going to be opportunities for playing time in at least year 2. So I have him at 31, like I said, and he's going in that mid to late third round range. I think about 307 is where Sleeper has him at the moment. So I think that's pretty good value. Getting a third round pick, this is about as late as you're going to be able to get somebody that went in the third round. There's really only 1 or 2 other receivers in this draft that went on day 2 that are going later than McMillan, or at least players that I have ranked lower. One of those is Malachi Corley, who a lot of people, I think the general consensus is that Corley is going ahead of McMillan in rookie drafts. And then the other is Luke McCaffrey, who I've seen late third and fourth round in most leagues to this point. And he went at the end of the third round to the Commanders. So McMillan, I think, is just a nice guy. Again, there's a path, right? There's a path to seeing the field, a path to opportunity, a path to being an impact player. So I think he was a very good player at Washington. Pre-draft, I had him ranked ahead of Jalen Polk. So this is a situation where I really like the player. Landing spot, is not the best, but, it's certainly at least a situation where you can see the path to playing time. Next up on my list, before we actually get to fourth round guys, so we're focusing on the third round first, and there is a player or two here that I want to talk about that I am avoiding in rookie drafts, and it's actually Malachi Corley, who we just mentioned. He was an early third round pick to the New York Jets, but I don't love the player. I think he's more of a gadget guy, screens and short passes and behind the line of scrimmage. I just don't see him as a true, route runner and somebody with breakaway speed and he wasn't an overly, special athlete, and I just don't know that I see the path. I think Aaron Rodgers is, probably going to be significantly less effective in his age and coming off the Achilles injury. Garrett Wilson is obviously going to eat up a large majority of the targets. Mike Williams is going to be the wide receiver 2. There's still going to be Allen Lazard. So I think you end up in a situation where, Allen Lazard, nothing special, kind of a throwaway for fantasy. We probably shouldn't block somebody like Malachi Corley, but I think your best case scenario is that Corley sees the field in three wide receiver sets, and I just don't know that this is going to be a particularly good offense, even with Rodgers being back and presumably healthy. And I just don't love the archetype of player. On the high end, everyone has seen these, comparisons of, Malachi Corley can be Deebo Samuel, but I don't see that. I think this is much more like an Amari Rodgers situation, who went to Green Bay a few years ago at Clemson. I just don't really see the path. And so he's somebody that he's currently going in the early third round of rookie drafts. Sleeper has him at 303, and I think that's too high. I have him at 33 in my ranks, so that is at the back of the third round. I think that's about 309. So if he were to fall to that range, 309, 310, something like that, that is much more of a situation where I'd be comfortable scooping him up, but not in the early or even mid third round am I looking to take Malachi Corley. And the other group of players that I'm not all that excited about drafting are the players that I kind of mentioned here at the back of the third round, and we're going to leak into the beginning of the fourth round here, so we'll talk about that as well. But it's that group of fourth round running backs, and I have Ray Davis at the top of that tier at number 34 in my rankings. So that's a 310. I think that is the earliest that I would take one of these guys, unless it's always a little bit situation dependent. If you're somebody that has James Cook and you're sitting there at 309 and you want to take Ray Davis, I think that's fine. Or Rachaad White or Saquon or whatever the situation is for somebody like Bucky Irving or Will Shipley, but Breece Hall managers at the end of the third. So, but generally speaking, unless you're scooping up your handcuff, I just don't love the running backs in this spot. I think there's a lot of people that I've seen, at least on social media this past week, say that they love this third round and, they're either trading up or trading players to get back into this range. And while there are certainly a handful of players that I, do like in the third round, as I just mentioned, there's, a few that I particularly am interested in, but I don't love trading back in if your goal is to scoop up some of these running backs. Day 3 picks at this position are typically, it's very difficult to hit on a player that actually ends up in a solid role that is a strong contributor for fantasy football. And I don't really see any of these guys being somebody that is going to be like a full-time starter. I think best case scenario, it's a bunch of committee guys, which is fine. There's a role for those players in fantasy, but not in the mid third round, like where these players are going. Generally speaking, mid to late third. I actually saw Will Shipley and Braylon Allen went undrafted in my home league, my home Dynasty league over the weekend. So that was very interesting. But hey, maybe our league is just full of smarter drafters by not taking some of these, running backs that I just don't think have much of a role. And I just don't really see the path. It would take a very serious injury. And even then, injuries to the starters here, you're probably just going to end up in a committee. I highly doubt that Tampa is just going to 100% go with Bucky Irving should something happen to Rachaad White or, James Cook goes down. I don't think it's going to just turn into the, Ray Davis show entirely. Same with the Jets and Braylon Allen, who also took Isaiah Davis in the 5th round. So, they certainly added a handful of players to their running back room. And then, the Eagles, Will Shipley, it's going to be the Saquon show. And then if something happens to him, which certainly is the case, Will Shipley might have a little bit of value, but you're talking about a situation where he's probably going to be splitting time with Kenneth Gainwell, and they always find other running backs there in Philadelphia to give the ball to at least a few times a game. So I'm just not really that excited about that group of players. So I would be waiting for those players to fall into the 4th round. I think that is where I'd be much more comfortable. And that's evidenced by these rankings where I have Ray Davis at 34, Bucky Irving at 35, Will Shipley at 36, Braylon Allen at 37, and Isaac Guerrero at 38. So I see those players as 4th round picks and not so much 3rd round picks. I have them ranked right on that 3-4 turn. But I'm really hoping that those guys are players that would fall to the 4th where I can then consider taking them instead of feeling like I'm reaching on a player that really doesn't belong. So moving on to the 4th round, I just mentioned, starting with Braylon Allen, that's where my start of the 4th round is in terms of my rankings. And so here are the players that I have right now going in the 4th. Braylon Allen at 37, that's the 401. And then Isaac Guerrero, Jacob Cowing, Theo Johnson, Luke McCaffrey, Malik Washington, Audric Estime, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Dylan Laube, Eric All, Rasheen Ali, and Anais Smith. So that goes through 37 to 48. So that's through 412, the end of your typical rookie draft. And I think there's actually a pretty solid cutoff after 47. I think there's a pretty big drop then when it comes to guys like Anais Smith, who has a chance to be the slot receiver for the Eagles, or Isaiah Davis, who we just mentioned, probably the 3rd string running back for New York. Cade Stover, AJ Barner, Tanner McLaughlin. There's a few guys kind of in that range that I'd be somewhat interested in as an undrafted free agent. I'm not somebody that's particularly interested in picking up a Spencer Rattler or a Jordan Travis or something like that. I just don't see much value in rostering, day 3 quarterback picks, and I would much rather take my shot on a running back or a wide receiver, but especially some of those later round running backs in the 4th round. I think that's your best chance at hitting on one of these picks. So some players that I do like in this situation, or this range, and let's start with a guy that I am very high on. I like him a lot. And he's going undrafted in a lot of sleeper leagues right now because he is just absolutely buried in their rankings. And that's Tyrone Tracy. He's somebody I think through 4 leagues he's been drafted in the 4th round twice, and then undrafted twice. And I believe, so I was the one that drafted him in one of those leagues. He was scooped up the pick before me in another, and then I was able to pick him up off of waivers in one. We're awaiting the results of the waiver run, which will come. We typically give everybody a day at least to kind of reset their rosters before we do the rookie waiver run. But I do have a claim in for Tyrone Tracy in my home league as well. So he's somebody that I have at 44. Mid-range round of round 4, and he's somebody that, again, we talk about opportunity for rookies, and if you're going to take a shot on, somebody that, chances are you're going to be cutting this player potentially after year 1, but maybe year 2. This guy's in a situation where Devin Singletary is the only other running back that you really have to worry about. I mean, there's Eric Gray, who the Giants drafted late last year. He didn't really do a whole lot. But then again, he was behind Saquon. So, some minor competition there. But Devin Singletary will be the starter for the Giants at running back. But then you have Tyrone Tracy, who, spent a long time in college. But he started out as a wide receiver, and then he switched over to running back. He had a pretty solid year at Purdue, and he can obviously catch the ball. He's got solid size, 5'11", 209. He had over 700 yards on just 114 attempts last year, including 8 touchdowns. So for somebody that was drafted as late as he was, he went 5th round to the Giants. I think this is a spot where lots of opportunity, and I probably have him ranked too low, actually. I think if push came to shove on the clock, I would probably take Tyrone Tracy over a handful of the names on this list. He's probably somebody that I should be bumping up to the early 4th round range, because I think that's really more of where I actually see him. And so that's, he's just somebody that I'm a big fan of in the fourth. If, in leagues where I have fourth round picks, he's somebody that I'm certainly targeting, and just gives you a nice, possibility of, hey, he could be something. He's going to see the field as a rookie. This is not just going to be Devin Singletary getting, 95% of the carries. There's going to be some opportunity, whether it's for Eric Gray or Tyrone Tracy, and I'm happy to take that shot in the fourth round on a running back that should see the field. Now, next up is another running back that I really like. I liked him pre-draft as well, and that's Dylan Laube, small school guy, and I believe it was New Hampshire, and he went to the Raiders in the 6th round, where it's an all right landing spot. There's certainly going to be some competition in that backfield. They brought in Alexander Madison. They have Amir Abdullah, and while I think that Dylan Laube can do pretty much everything that Amir Abdullah can do, he's a little bit younger, obviously, and they just drafted him. So if they're going to take a guy in the draft in the 6th round, this wasn't just a throwaway 7th round pick or something like that. There's going to be some opportunity for him to make the roster, and if he does, Dylan Laube is a very, very good pass catcher. So we're talking about a situation in fantasy where, most people are playing in PPR leagues, and he's going to catch passes. I mean, whether it's Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, whatever this quarterback situation is going to be in Vegas, this is somebody that had 68 catches for almost 700 yards last year, including 7 receiving touchdowns. So he's got good size at 5'10", 206. He can still run the ball. 745 yards and 9 touchdowns last year and 160 carries. So Dylan Laube, another late round dart throw that I'm willing to make, because that the running back room there is, it's a little bit unproven, and there's going to be an opportunity for him to to see the field. So Dylan Laube, the next guy on my list that I am interested in the 4th round. Now, next up, let's talk about one more running back, 2 more running backs actually here that I like in this 4th round / undrafted type of territory. So Audric Estime is getting drafted. I've seen him picked up in every league. I've seen it range from early 4th to late 4th, maybe even the 3-4 turn in one league. But he goes to a situation in Denver as a 5th round pick where I think the early downs he could certainly get mixed in, especially at the goal line. There is Javonte Williams, who can kind of do a bit of everything and will certainly serve as, he's still going to be the running back 1, of course. A 5th round running back that can't really catch the ball is not going to come in and replace him by any means. But this could be a situation where Samaje Perine gets pushed out of a job. Jaleel McLaughlin last year had some flashes as a rookie. He probably, doesn't see quite as many opportunities this year, or if he does, it's going to be, just a little bit more of the pass catching role, but he's probably not going to get that many carries because Audric Estime is a really good runner. He's not fast. We all saw the 40-yard dash time that was slow at the 4.7, but he's a big dude. He's a strong runner, very, very productive in college at Notre Dame, and he goes to a situation where Sean Payton does like to use a committee. We saw for years and years in New Orleans, where Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram were kind of that 1-2 punch. So it's, the possibility is there. I'm certainly not saying that he's going to turn into Mark Ingram, but, he could at least get some carries and see the field. And again, we talk about opportunity in the 4th round. This is a guy that I think will at least get some opportunity. And, I'd be perfectly fine with taking him in the 4th round. The other running back, and this is actually somebody that I've seen go undrafted in every league so far, but I have him ranked at 47, so somebody that I would take here at the very end of a draft, and that's Rasheen Ali from Marshall. He went in the 5th round to the Baltimore Ravens, and this is somebody that I think will likely go undrafted in a majority of leagues, and so this is somebody that you can target on waivers, and he goes to a Baltimore team that outside of Derrick Henry, there's not a ton of competition. I think Keaton Mitchell is incredibly overrated and coming off a very severe injury. There's there's just not Justice Hill. There's just not a lot of competition here in Baltimore. And so, Derrick Henry may be in Baltimore for 2 seasons. He may be there for 1. He's getting older. Who knows what kind of, rusher he's going to be this year. So if you're looking for somebody that, again, there's a path to him having some sort of relevance. This is a team that doesn't particularly love to pay running backs. So if Ali does show some talent on the field as a rookie, they might be more than willing to just hand the keys off to him at the running back position starting as soon as 2025. So for an undrafted rookie that you can get for a handful of fab dollars, Rasheen Ali is somebody that I will scoop up in that situation off of waivers. Now, the final 2 players that I want to talk about that I like in this scenario, I'll start with Malik Washington, who I have at 42. Wide receiver, went to the Miami Dolphins in the 6th round, and he's a slot receiver, was incredibly productive this past year at Virginia after transferring from Northwestern. But then the Dolphins went out and they signed Odell Beckham Jr. That certainly hurts Malik Washington's opportunity to see the field in week 1. I think all of a sudden, best case scenario, you're talking about Washington pushing for a wide receiver 4 role. But OBJ is only there in a 1-year deal. There's some injury concerns. The Dolphins receivers in general, Jalen Waddle has struggled with injuries throughout his career a little bit. So there's probably going to be some opportunity for him. And given his productivity level in college, and he's a pretty good athlete, I could see an opportunity, a window for Malik Washington to have some sort of impact as a rookie and build on that in year 2. So for a mid 4th round rookie pick, I think I got him at 407 in one league. I've seen him go generally mid 4th in every draft so far. I think that's a pretty solid value pick at wide receiver. And the final player that I want to talk about in terms of somebody that I am targeting, I also like Eric All at tight end. He went to the Cincinnati Bengals in the 4th round. I have him ranked at 46. So this is, again, somebody that I'm taking, with your final pick in the draft, very end, the final end of a rookie draft. And this is somebody that was a good pass-catching weapon at Michigan, carried that over to Iowa, and he goes to a team in Cincinnati that doesn't really have much at the tight end position. They do have Mike Gesicki, who will, be the starter this year, but there is opportunity for Eric All to take that role over, to certainly move into it in year 2. And tight ends in general take a year or 2 usually to, really figure out the position in the NFL and secure a role. We see it all the time. Last year was really kind of an aberration in terms of tight ends, jumping onto the scene and having a really productive year 1. We don't see that very often. So if this is somebody, if you have the space on your roster to, stash a guy and, give him a year or 2 on your bench to see, hey, could this guy become the Bengals tight end of the future? Obviously, being paired with Joe Burrow certainly is helpful for his fantasy value. So that's another guy that I would be willing to throw your final pick in a rookie draft on. I think he's been picked in, 2 of the 4 drafts that I've been in and scooped up on waivers in the other 2. So I think my ranking at 46 is pretty fair with that, and would show that that's probably going to be the case for most leagues where it's, 50-50 shot whether he's there for you at the end of a draft. So Eric All, and there's a number of tight ends too that probably are not going to be drafted, but will go undrafted, and you'll have a chance on waivers to pick them up for very little. And AJ Barner, Cade Stover, Tanner McLaughlin's the other Bengals tight end that went in the 6th round. He's a very good pass catcher. So if you want to take a shot on him, if you draft Eric All at the 411 and you want to throw, $5 fab dollars at Tanner McLaughlin or something like that, you probably get him for 1. I don't think that many people are going to be fighting over, guys like McLaughlin or Barner, on waivers. So if you want to add a very cheap rookie tight end, I think that's a perfectly fine strategy to do, coming off of waivers. And I would much rather take that kind of shot than stash a, 5th or 6th, 7th round quarterback or, some of these 7th round receiver. I'm not really looking to roster Brandon Rice or Cornelius Johnson or even somebody like Tip Ryman, who a third round tight end to Arizona. Very good athlete too, but he's stuck behind Trey McBride. So if you want to throw him on your bench for $1, no issues with that either. But you just have to know he's probably not going to see the field a whole lot outside of being a blocker. So in terms of fantasy value, probably not going to be much there, even though he was a third round pick. Kansas City took Jared Wiley, another guy you can get on waivers. So I'm an advocate for stashing tight ends on your bench if you have the space, and think that's a perfectly fine strategy to take. So that's really everybody that I wanted to talk about today. Hope everybody is having fun with the rookie drafts, and whether you have either completed yours, I hope my rankings last week were helpful to you. Sleeper ADP has actually adjusted fairly closely to my rankings, so kind of nice to see that as well. It shows I'm on the right page here, and identifying players that I like also seems to be, they also seem to be players that the community likes. So positive sign there. And I have more drafts coming up this week, next week, throughout the month. You probably do as well. So hopefully between last week's episode and this week, there'll be some good tips in there to help you land the players that you like in your leagues. So thank you all again for tuning in. This is the Dynasty War Room podcast. And thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next week.